I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the tragic murder of Keith Canero and his entire family, wiped out before their sprawling mansion was then set on fire. And prosecutors say it was Keith's own brother who did it. Here's the story. In the early morning darkness of November 20th, 2018, a wealthy New Jersey mansion stood quietly in horse country, Colts Neck, until it erupted in flames and horror. Inside were the charred bodies of Keith Canero, his wife Jennifer, and their two young children, found dead after the fire consumed their home. Authorities say Keith was shot outside the house, his wife shot and stabbed, and their children brutally stabbed, all before any flames touched wood. Prosecutors say hours earlier, Keith's brother Paul Caneiro allegedly set fire to his own home in a nearby town. A rushed blaze, prosecutors argue, was a ruse to mask the real atrocity. Today, Paul Caneiro sits jailed facing first-degree murder, aggravated arson, and weapons charges, while a peaceful community struggles to grasp how greed and betrayal allegedly extinguished a whole family. A whole family gone. Just gone. Yeah, he owned a mansion. Yes, he was, wealthy, and the family was... But the whole family is just gone. Mom, dad, and two kids. Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, digging into this one for us tonight. To me, this is really a story about family. I'm from New Jersey also. This takes place in New Jersey. And I know family is big everywhere, but I can relate to this one because I know about those families in New Jersey and what things are like. So what do we know about the Caneros?
Well, Vinny, Paul and his brother Keith, they lived in New Jersey, of course. They were in business together. Paul was a businessman. He owned a $500,000 home. He owned a white Porsche convertible. A family friend called them all very close-knit and unassuming. Just a very well-to-do suburban New Jersey family, Vinny. And of course, to understand, the full breakdown of everybody involved in this case, we have made a family tree to help our viewers understand everything going on here. So we start, of course, with the defendant, Paul Caneiro, 51 at the time of the killings. Then he had his wife, who is Susan Canero. And then they had two daughters, one Caitlin Canero, now age 33, and the other one Marissa, who is now 30 years old. Now we get to the victim, Paul's brother. This is Keith. Keith was 50 years old at the time of his death. And then Paul's sister-in-law, which would be Keith's wife, that was Jennifer Canero, 45 years old, Paul's nephew, Jesse, aged 11, and Paul's niece, Sophia, who was only 8 years old at the time when this happened. Vinny, just a tragedy all around, but that is the breakdown of the family. You can see the house engulfed in flames there, but again, just a tragedy, that this is a family dynamic here going on with this.
It is, and obviously, they're close in age. Keith and Paul. So what do we know about this relationship, the brothers?
Well, yeah, they were in business together. Now, Keith lived, of course, out in Colts Neck, out in horse country, a very affluent area out in New Jersey. Now, we have an image of his sprawling mansion. Again, we just saw it there on fire. Now, this is the mansion that Paul allegedly set fire to. Now, the brothers, the business they had together, they started a computer business back in 2001 as young men. And they later started a pest control company as well. But here's the kicker, Vinny. This is where it all, starts to go haywire here. Paul allegedly stole $90,000 from his brother Keith, according to a lawsuit filed by a family member. Now, that lawsuit alleges that Paul's brother said Paul was not, quote, carrying his weight in their businesses and was spending too much money out of their business accounts. And Paul's brother was going to cut off Paul's $225,000 annual salary. Now that's important because prosecutors have said the motive for these murders was money related, but they haven't really elaborated on further detail. But it's almost a $250,000 salary that Paul was about to lose in business with his own brother, though.
Yeah, it's interesting also looking at where they live. They both live in nice towns, but Keith is living in Colts Neck, which if you're from New Jersey, oh, you're from Colts Neck, right? He's got the sprawling mansion. His older brother's got the smaller house, Paul does. Let's get to the specifics, though. What exactly is Paul accused of doing to all those family members that we saw in the tree that you put up there?
Well, Vinny, to keep it brief, Paul is accused of killing his brother and his entire family before coming back to his own house and setting his own house on fire with his wife and children inside. Take a listen to the prosecutor kind of laying this all out.
We allege that the defendant repeatedly shot and killed his brother while he was outside of the side of his home, and then moved to murder the rest of the family inside the home. We allege that Jennifer was shot and stabbed, and the two Canero children were repeatedly stabbed by knife.
Vinny shooting his own brother 4 times in the head, no less, and once in the back, a total of 5 times, then killing his sister-in-law by shooting and stabbing her, and stabbing to death his niece and nephew who are only 8 and 11 years old. And, you know, he allegedly set fire to that big mansion before going back to his own house. Like I was saying, setting fire to his house with his family inside. And Vinny, we have a picture here. Caitlin Canero, one of Paul Canero's daughters, posted this picture to Facebook. It shows the 4 victims, her uncle, aunt, and 2 cousins. Again, Vinny, this is just this incredible tragedy all around here.
Oh, it's bad. It's bad. Brother turning on brother, allegedly, and taking out all those folks in such a brutal manner. Cody's going to be around the whole hour. Thanks so much. And that brings us to the first question in our investigation. And it's about the allegations here. How could someone allegedly do this to their own family? Shooting your brother, stabbing your sister-in-law, stabbing to death your small niece and nephew. This is bad. Here to help answer the question, licensed clinical psychologist Dr. Jamie Zuckerman and journalist and media analyst Marquette Shepard. Great to have you both here. Looking for you. There you are. Gotcha. Excellent. Great to see you. All right, Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, let's presume that this happened, that he did it, that a brother did this to his own brother, his own sister-in-law, his own niece and nephew. How could someone, what state of mind does someone have to be in to get to that point?
Yeah, I think if this is what happens, that you're dealing with somebody who was feeling an extreme loss of control over their life, over their image, over, the family man that he appeared to be in the community. It sounds very financially motivated and something, that is a threat to how you live your day-to-day life. It didn't really seem like he had that much control over the finances. He was getting paid by his brother, but he was also stealing simultaneously and was threatened that they were going to stop payments. So to me, it looks like somebody who is trying desperately to regain any sense of control and power that they can through whatever means necessary, and anyone that's in the way, they're going to take care of.
Marquette, I'm looking at this story, and it's the older brother who's accused here, Keith was the younger brother, but he was the one that seemed to be much more successful. They were partners to some extent, but do you think there's a theme of jealousy along with the allegations and being cut off that is fueling potentially what happened here?
Well, jealousy is a normal human emotion. From all of my years of reporting, this is something much more dark and disturbing, as the psychologist just said. Now, I've covered many trials where you have this type of gruesome murder, and it's always somebody who knows the victim. It's a very close inner circle type person like this. And what I'm thinking is there's mental illness going on. There's just maybe outsized emotions, maybe power money or the fear of losing a lifestyle that he's worked his entire life to attain going away. And he lost control, like the doctor said. When I've covered trials like this, it's never good. The impact of the jurors, the impact of the journalists sitting in the courtroom, being the ears and the eyes to the people, it affects you because you see the pictures, from the fire. You see evidence that the police picked up at the scene and the investigators. And it's something that if you are a high-functioning, normal contributor to society, it's almost too hard to bear. So imagine the actual murderer in this case who actually did it. If they're able to do it and sit there with a straight face, something dark is going on.
Yeah. And the part that really strikes me, right? All right, brothers are in business, bad blood, jealousy, whatever. Doctor, the niece and nephew, so young. And the allegation is stabbing. This is like, you're not like shooting from afar. You're up and you are taking their lives. Look at these little guys, little guy, little girl. I mean, my goodness, that's like next level depravity and desperation if you are taking a knife to your niece and nephew.
Yeah, that really was so jarring to me, because when you are dealing with someone who stabs you repeatedly, that is very personal, that is very emotional, and they're children who did nothing wrong. And so anybody watching this is not, not going to sit well with anybody who sees that. You don't even need to have kids to feel this. But again, I go back to, you're dealing with somebody who likely has no remorse, no empathy, views people around them as objects and obstacles. And, like I said earlier, looked at everybody as an obstacle that he needed to get through to be able to get what he wanted, whether that was control, whether that was money, we don't know yet.
Yeah, he probably would have taken over the whole business. That could be part of the big plan.
Yeah.
And again, just accused. The trial's coming up. It's coming up early next year. Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, great to see you. Thanks so much. Marquette Shepard's going to stick around. Coming up next, how important is the DNA and the video evidence?
The disappearance of mother Anna Walsh.
Her husband now charged with her murder.
All eyes on this accused killer.
Mr. Walsh was suspecting his wife of having an affair.
The massive trail of evidence.
This incredible timeline of Google searches.
It shows everything that was in his mind.
He searched how long before a body starts to smell.
The disappearance of Anna Walsh murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
This one is the most brutal case that I've seen in my experience here. And I know that the entire team of investigators and people involved in working on this case, the fire officials, that they've struggled with this too.
This is a brutal case. An entire family wiped out, and the defendant, the accused, is the brother of the victim, the brother-in-law of the victim, and the uncle of 2 other victims. Unbelievable. Now, this is a case that's been around for quite some time. It's been lingering now for more than 7 years. Let me bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Delays happen. New Jersey, it always takes some time, but this one is like a very long time. There's been a lot of litigation. You had COVID, all these other things that kind of have slowed it down. What's some of the evidence, though, that they've been fighting about in court?
Well, Vinny, yeah, almost 8 years, and of course all of those factors that you just named played a part in why it's been so delayed, but another part is because of all these fights and arguments in court about this evidence. Now, there's 2 pieces of evidence that really stand out in particular, and that's the DNA evidence and evidence taken from a DVR home surveillance system in Paul Canero's house. But I first want to walk through the arguments surrounding the DNA and kind of break it down to give our viewers a better understanding. Now, DNA analysts say a mixture of Paul's DNA and his dead niece's DNA was found on gloves and a pair of jeans in the basement of Paul's home. Now, this finding was based on newer DNA technology called STR mix. Prosecutors say this technology has been used and tested repeatedly and is generally accepted in the scientific community due to its consistent results, right? So it differs from traditional DNA testing in the fact that it is specifically designed to test small amounts of DNA in complicated mixtures that can't be analyzed through traditional methods. So, for example, if this less than ideal sample is found on something of 2 or more people's DNA, this technology determines this likelihood ratio that a person of interest can be either included or excluded as a contributor to that sample. Now, why is all this important? Why is it all controversial? Why are they arguing about it in court? The defense says this technology, this new STR mix technology, has not been adequately tested, and they say it's not reliable. They even went on record saying that testing has been done better on mobile apps on our phones versus this in a court of law. Their point being that the technology isn't equipped to differentiate samples of people who are actually related, like Paul and his niece, which they say they found this DNA in his home, bringing it back to Paul and his niece. So ultimately, with all of those arguments, the judge still said that this DNA evidence from this controversial technology will be admissible at trial. So that's the DNA evidence, Vinny. Now we're moving on to the DVR home surveillance evidence. And the issue around this, why it was argued so much, is that when police responded to Paul Canero's home when it was literally on fire, they took his DVR home surveillance system without getting a proper warrant, considering, again, that it was literally on fire when they were there and they thought that delaying it would be unreasonable. So the defense obviously opposed admitting whatever footage is found or is on this DVR system into evidence given the lack of a proper warrant. But oddly enough, the New Jersey Supreme Court decided otherwise. And they said the police actually acted reasonably given the high pressure circumstances. Now, why is this important? Prosecutors allege that the surveillance system shows Paul Caneiro walking up to the camera in his garage at 1:29 a.m. that night or morning, depending how you look at it, and shutting it off to mask his departure from his house, to drive to his brother's house, to commit all these murders before coming back to set his own house on fire with his family also inside, which would be supporting part of the prosecution's timeline. And Vinny, this evidence will also be admissible once this trial begins.
All right. Thanks so much, Cody. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation, and it's about this evidence. How important is the DNA and the video evidence that was fought over but will be admitted? Here to help with our investigation is New Jersey former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney at Gelman Law, David Gelman, and New Jersey criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Al Wunsch III. Great to see you both. All right, how big is this, David?
Vinny, it's huge. Look, I know the prosecutors there very well. I'm in Monmouth County quite a bit. And the SRT mixed DNA samples that they were doing, that they had the evidentiary hearing, this was a huge hearing. The Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office, they literally flew in the guy who created this from New Zealand. They had these hearings for days and days, and they fought about it. And this is going to be very, very big to the jury. The prosecutor's office, they're going to have to make a very good case to them, showing them, look, I know this is new technology, but when you have DNA that's almost 100% guaranteed that it was mixed with the niece, this is the killer. That is what they're going to say. And I think it's going to be a very big selling point to them, to the jury.
Al, your thoughts. How big is this evidence?
It's huge. I mean, the situation with regards to the DVR of him turning off the unit, and at the time that he disappears from the house, I mean, the significance in that is absolutely devastating to the defense, and that's the defense ended up getting lucky, getting it knocked out by the trial level, getting it knocked out at the appellate level, and then the Supreme Court did a complete turnaround, and I was very surprised that the Supreme Court ruled the way they did, but they did unanimously and said, no, It was objectively reasonable under the circumstances. There was a fire going on. Obviously, that DVR would have been significant if they were going to investigate how the house was torched or who torched the house. So the police had the right to expeditiously go in without a warrant because it was 5:30 in the morning. And even though the fire was out in the area of the garage, it still could have been damaged. It still could have disappeared. It was reasonable. That is going to be a real problem for the defense, and the DNA is just putting a cherry on top of the sundae.
Yeah. And Dave, the one thing that's interesting, when I practiced years and years ago in New Jersey, I always thought, when cases got older, they got better for the defense, worse for the prosecution. With DNA cases, because the technology keeps getting better and better and better, if you actually have arrested the correct person, these cases for prosecutors are getting older and stronger.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? Because usually you were exactly right, Vinny. The older the case goes, the better for the defense. That's how I always look at it. But, now exactly the DNA evidence, the technology that we have here with the legal community, it's insane. And it keeps getting better and better. And it's going to be even better for the prosecutor. You're exactly right. And I don't think the defense, that's why they fought so damn hard to try to keep this out, because this new technology, the jury, they're going to really eat this up if you think about it. When you hear about this stuff as a juror, you're going to be like, oh, this is very interesting. I didn't know they could do this. Wow. Oh, okay. So this is going to be something that's huge. And agreed, again, longer it goes into effect, the more technology we have, better for the prosecutors now.
All right, so Al, versus the other aspects of this case, like motive, history, bad blood, all of that sort of stuff, how important do you think this will be for the jury versus the rest of the story about the business and everything else that was going on between the two brothers?
Well, the business aspect of it sets the table, okay? Because you need to have the table set so that the jury understands that something as horrendous as a Cain slewing Abel type of situation, where a brother is going to come in and not only massacre, his brother, but also his brother's family. You need to have the table set to show that there was bad blood to begin with. Then what's going to end up happening is that any type of defense that the defense can throw out there, and the talk had been about the mafia or this, that, the other thing going on with regards to bad business deals and some nefarious creatures of the night coming in there. It's going to be very difficult for them to overcome that with the DNA and the video. So the table's going to be set with all of that backstory, and then they're going to put the meat out onto the table, and the jury's going to feast.
All right. Guests are sticking around. Still to come. Does the prosecution's timeline make sense? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the murders of Keith Canero, his wife, and his children. A family executed inside their sprawling New Jersey mansion. And the man prosecutors say was responsible, his own brother. Here's the story. It began with money, resentment, and a widening fracture between brothers Paul Caneiro and Keith Canero, men who once shared both blood and business. On a cold November morning in Colts Neck, New Jersey, any hope of reconciliation vanished. Keith Canero was found dead on his front lawn, shot before flames swallowed up his sprawling mansion. Inside, the tragedy deepened. Police say Jennifer Canero, just 45, was killed next, along with their children, 11-year-old Jesse and 8-year-old Sophia. Investigators believe they were stabbed before the mansion burned, their final moments stolen in silence. Hours earlier, prosecutors say Paul Caneiro lit his own house on fire across town in Ocean Township, a staged distraction meant to blur motive and timeline. Now, Paul Caneiro faces murder and aggravated arson charges as New Jersey braces for a trial rooted in betrayal, rage, and unspeakable loss.
I can't imagine. You know, in these cases, I always try to, and you can't really go there, right, inside the mind of an accused killer, but you try to think, like, what are you thinking at the time? If, in fact, he's responsible, I'm going to kill my brother, I'm going to kill my sister-in-law, I'm going to kill my niece, I'm going to kill my nephew, I'm going to set his house on fire, I'm going to set my house on fire, they'll never suspect me. Like, what kind of thinking is this? Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Cody, you've been digging into some of the evidence here and the prosecution's case. What do we know about the prosecution's timeline here?
Well, yeah, Vinny, the prosecution, of course, is fully behind the idea that Paul Caneiro murdered his brother, his whole family, set that house on fire, went back to his own house, set that on fire with his wife and kids inside in order to try to throw investigators off into thinking it was some sort of targeted family mob hit or what have you. But let's walk through their timeline, the details of their timeline on November 20th, 2018, when this all occurred. So they say at or before 4 a.m., Paul Caneiro allegedly shoots and kills his brother Keith Canero in front of Keith's Colts Neck, New Jersey home. Paul Caneiro then allegedly shoots and stabs Keith's 45-year-old wife, Jennifer. He allegedly stabs the Canero children, 11-year-old Jesse and 8-year-old Sophia, multiple times. Then Paul goes into the basement of the Colts Neck home to start the fire. Now we fast forward to around 5 a.m. that morning. Paul Caneiro allegedly returns to his Ocean Township home with evidence from the Colts Neck murders. The suspect being Paul, allegedly sets fire to the outside of his Ocean Township home with his wife and 2 daughters inside. 20 minutes later, 5:20 a.m., firefighters respond to the fire at Paul's home in Ocean Township. And then further into the afternoon, 12:38 p.m., emergency responders received a call about a fire at Keith Canero's Colts Neck home, the brother, eventually finding the whole family to be deceased. And of course, Vinny, we know just a few days later, Paul is arrested and charged with those murders of his brother and his family and the arson of his own home. And he is still sitting behind bars today, all these years later.
That's interesting that the fire really isn't discovered till later that day. Depends, I guess, what type of fire.
Could have been a slow burn fire. The house is so big.
Right, and the house is huge, and you don't have neighbors right next door like you do in the neighborhood that Paul lived in. All right, thanks so much, Cody. That brings us to the next question in our investigation. Gets to the heart of the case here. Does the prosecution's timeline make sense? Crimes never make sense from my perspective, but the timeline of the allegations here. Here to help answer the question, former detective, more than 20 years working homicides and high-profile cases. Phil Waters is back with us, and still with us, journalist and media analyst Marquette Shepard. All right, Phil, what are your thoughts here about the timeline, the allegations here? Does it fit? Are there some questions that you still have about this? What do you think?
I think the prosecutors have got a great case. I was listening to some of the comments from your previous commenters on this thing, and I will tell you that establishing a timeline is very important. I always try to do that in every case that I work because it's important to know who was where and what did they do when they were there. And so in this particular case, it looks like they've got the evidence that leads them to where he started, where he got to, what he did when he got there, and then what he did after he left. This was a well planned out execution. I can't imagine the depravity that this guy is exhibiting, and it's just a pure act of evil. But I think the timeline is good. We've got him, I think, turning off a DVR at a particular time in the morning, which establishes where he is. And so you've got these little markers along the way, and it's all important to get him at the beginning when he shoots the brother. He goes into the house. This fire that he sets, I'm sure he probably expected it to ignite a lot faster than it did, it appears. And then he goes home and he tries to recreate the same kind of scenario at his own home to throw off the authorities, but I think they've got this one figured out.
Marquette, what are your thoughts about the timeline? What questions and what information are you waiting to hear when the trial begins, right? So this is sort of an outline. What strikes you here in the prosecution's case?
Right. Now, if I was a reporter covering this trial, I would start with that date, November 20th, 2018. That is 2 days before Thanksgiving. And we all know tensions amongst families run really high around the holidays. A lot of crime in between families and self-harm happens during the holidays. This is a story I've covered year after year for almost 2 decades. So I would be wondering, was there some type of betrayal? What was planned for the holidays between these two brothers? They worked together. They obviously spent a lot of personal time together because they lived close. But what was going on in the family dynamics to cause the oldest brother to shoot his younger brother on his front lawn? So there's something there that's not being told. And I would want that to come out in court. But the prosecution, it's really with the DNA evidence and, the DVR recording of him doing this work. It's a sloppy case. It's a case of somebody who hasn't spent his entire time staging crimes. He's the suspect, we're calling him, because he's not convicted. But this is somebody who did a crime of passion. And the passion is love or hate for his brother. And so I would pull out some of the soap opera storytelling in the courtroom, and that's what's going to move the jurors beyond a reasonable doubt. And I do want to point out there are 2 cases for where I'm from. Vinnie, you mentioned New Jersey. Well, down here in Montgomery County, Maryland, we had mansion murders in Potomac, and beautiful neighborhood, very, very similar to the one that Paul and Keith lived in. And you are not safe just because you live in a big, beautiful neighborhood. I want people to know that, your viewers. Big, beautiful homes doesn't mean character and that you're free of crime. It's all about the interpersonal dynamics. And that is what's going to spill out in the trial and tip the jurors over, if they're not already tipped over by the DNA evidence, the DVR, and the financial woes that the brothers were going through.
Great analysis. Phil, the question I have is 4 a.m. How does he get his brother to come outside of his mansion at 4 a.m.? Is it a phone call? Is he just ringing the doorbell? Was there any sort of pattern to that? Because if someone came over to my house at 4 a.m., I don't know if I would come outside because I don't think you could wake me up. But what are your thoughts there about that part of the story? How does he get his brother outside at 4 a.m.?
Well, I think Marquette kind of hit it on the head. You got to look at this interpersonal connection with these guys. Obviously, there's something going on there, and we don't know what previous conversations were before he made contact, however he made it, whether he just showed up at the house and he's banging on the door and the brother comes out and says, get the heck off my lawn, and go home, sleep it off, whatever. But and because of this connection that they have as brothers, he's going to be more prone to go out and speak to him in the middle of the night. If it was a stranger that was out there doing the same kind of thing, trying to get his attention, what's he going to do? He's going to either arm himself and go out and confront this person, or he's going to call 911. More than likely, he's going to call 911, say there's some crazy guy on the lawn screaming at my house at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I think it's because of the connection here, the family connection here, that gets him out there to even speak to him. And of course, we don't know how long they were out there before the brother finally commits the act and shoots, and then goes forward with the rest of his plan. So, I tell you, this kind of a case, if there's one thing I learned in homicide after 23 years, is that anyone, me, you, Vinnie, Marquette, anyone is capable of any act under the right set of circumstances. And this guy, for whatever reasons, he suffered under the right set of circumstances to call him to wipe out an entire part of his family.
Yeah, Phil, as you were talking, what a great point. I'm still a prosecutor at heart, and I'm thinking about my closing argument, and that's a huge point I would make. 4 a.m. He's not going out at 4 a.m. to see some stranger. 4 a.m., he'll come outside to speak to his brother, But he's not going out there if it's someone he doesn't know at 4 a.m. No, you're calling 911. The other thing I'm really curious, Marquette, and I'm surprised we haven't seen it or heard about it necessarily. This huge mansion, I would think that he would have some sort of security system. But again, we're going back in time. Like now we take it for granted. Everybody's got a Ring or everyone's got the easy security that ends up on your cell phone. But going back to 2018, I don't know if it was exactly where it was, so maybe it's not as automatic. But that would be amazing evidence to have, because that's not, if his brother had a DVR that was recording stuff, my guess is they didn't have anything quite like we have today, where your security system and your cameras all end up on your phone or on the cloud.
But, you know, I will say, for a house like that, for insurance purposes, I'm sure their insurance company told them, if you have a surveillance camera, you save so many $100 per month. And then, like we just discussed, this is his brother calling him. And we've all lived enough life to know what keeps you up at night, right? The risk of losing your home, the risk of losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and relationship problems. And so I'm looking at this, having covered so many different crimes and court cases and just stories about people in a really bad place in their lives. And those are the things that keep people up at night. And what do you do if you're in business with someone and you know you're in trouble and that someone is your brother? You wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you call him, or maybe you go over to his house, and by the time you get there, it's 4 o'clock in the morning and his guard is down because he's known you his entire life. This case is a mess. And my heart goes out to the families, the poor children, the victims. Like, how could anyone do this to those two adorable, innocent little children? And then let's think about Paul's surviving family members.
Yeah,
this guy has really messed up a lot of lives.
Yeah, he destroyed 2 families, if he's responsible for this. Big thank you, Phil Waters. Always great to see you. Marquette Shepard, thanks. Please come back. Coming up next. All right, here's the question. What's his defense?
The disappearance of mother Anna Walsh.
Her husband now charged with her murder.
All eyes on this accused killer.
Mr. Walsh was suspecting his wife of having an affair.
The massive trail of evidence.
This incredible timeline of Google searches.
It shows everything that was in his mind.
He searched how long before a body starts to smell.
The disappearance of Anna Walsh murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
That fire was effectively a ruse designed to make it appear as if the overall Canero family was somehow targeted.
Unbelievable. 2 houses on fire, 1 family dead, another family, they all survived. So if someone was attacking you, why would they set one house on fire and kill everyone inside and set the other house on fire and not touch anyone? That's interesting, right? Again, this case goes back to 2018, a lot of litigation, a lot of motions filed, a lot of hearings. Let's bring back in Court TV field producer Cody Thomas. Cody, what evidence has been suppressed? What evidence has been kept out that will not be a part of this case that the jury won't hear?
Well, Vinny, all digital data from Paul Canero's iPad and his MacBook laptop have been suppressed in full. Now, of course, prosecutors argue that because Paul and Keith were not only brothers but business partners, communication surrounding the motive for these murders might have been found on some of these digital devices, the motive and the planning. But the judge said he made this ruling due to a lack of specificity in the application for the search warrant. Now, he said the detective wrote that they expected to find evidence of arson on Paul's electronic devices, but, quote, failed to identify with particularity the specific devices expected to be found or articulate probable cause to believe those devices contained evidence of the alleged crimes. So, Vinny, it sounds like a bit of a clerical error on behalf of the detective, but the judge did say that limited digital data from the Apple Watch and Paul's phone will be admissible once this goes to trial.
So they get some from the phone, some from the Apple Watch, not getting into his iPad or his MacBook. because they did not have the specific information, didn't request it, didn't have the probable cause to back it up. All right. Cody Thomas, great work tonight. Thank you so much. All right, so they kept some evidence out, but it brings us to the final question in our investigation this hour. And it's about Paul Caneiro. He's going to trial. What's his defense? Right? Every defendant's got some defense. Still here helping us with our investigation, New Jersey former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney at Gelman Law, David Gelman, and New Jersey criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Al Wunsch III. Al, your thoughts. What do you think his defense is going to be here?
Well, you know, I did a little deep dive into Colts Neck. I mean, it's a pretty ritzy area. Bruce Springsteen lives there.
Wayne Corbett,
bass player, and the former bass player from John Bon Jovi lives there also. And to find the criminal activity in Colts Neck, I had to go back to 1973 when Emmanuel Gambino, the nephew of Carlo Gambino, who had been kidnapped and taken outside of a bar that was owned by Henry Hill, believe it or not, and was kidnapped, and his body was found in Colts Neck. And what was interesting is when the FBI did the investigation and they were trying to figure out why they ended up in Colts Neck, they came to the conclusion that the guys that had the body got lost and were trying to get to the Pine Barrens and didn't get there, panicked, and just buried him in Colts Neck and then headed back up to North Jersey. So the mob aspect of this is going to be, probably where he's going. It's either going to be the Russian mob or it's going to be the Italian mafia or things along those lines. And it was always a myth that the mafia did not kill women and children. That was always a myth because that's happened throughout the history of the mob. But I think they're going to have a real hard time getting anyone to believe that under the circumstance.
All right. Before we run out of time, I want to get over to David Gelman. David, what are your thoughts about how the defense defends this man?
Well, number one, Colts Neck also has some great golf courses. Just going to throw that out there. Number two, you know that song from Shaggy, It Wasn't Me? That's what they're going to say. Look, why would I kill my brother? I loved my brother. I loved his wife. I loved my niece and nephew. Why would I ever do such a thing? That's their theme. That's what they're going to do. It wasn't me. It was the mob. It was somebody who just didn't like our family. They set my house on fire. They set somebody else, my brother's house on fire. Now, look, is it a bridge that's gone too far? Are they going to be able to really hang their hat on that? I don't know. The jury's really going to be determining that, obviously. And there's a lot of evidence against them. But that is going to be the defense. And look, if they have any reasonable doubt, you got to throw it up against the wall and let the jury decide it. And hopefully, for them, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Al, we only have about 15 seconds left here. Do you think they'll specifically point the finger elsewhere or just say, hey, the evidence isn't there?
I think they're going to say the evidence isn't there. I don't think they're going to be able to bring anything in along those lines. I think it'd be ridiculous for them to do it, and it'll end up messing up their whole defense.
All right. Great job tonight. Al Wunsch III, David Gelman. Great to see you guys. Appreciate it. This one is a very dark story. Allegations that a brother would wipe out his own brother's family in cold blood. It's a type of allegation where prosecutors need to get to the jury to understand why he would do it. Things like, is money, jealousy, and desperation enough? Well, it is for prosecutors, right? They believe that's what drove all this. The question is it enough for a jury? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.